What's this? A video on something that isn't a certain thing that's circulating in the news right now? Why yes, welcome to a Snake Solid video about a game. So a while ago on this channel, back before I did this kind of I speak my mind out loud and just ramble and then edit it later phase that I'm going through right now, I did a bunch of scripted videos on some old Shovel Knight games, and I say they're old, but like, actually, you know what? Shovel of Hope actually is pretty old. It's like almost 10 years right now, I think. But back then, I did videos on the 4 Shovel Knight campaigns of Treasure Trove. Shovel of Hope, Plague of Shadows, King of Cards, and, of course, Spectre of Torment. So, I was kind of brainstorming for ideas, and I thought it would be fun to cover one of the more recent ones that came out after Treasure Trove was done. I haven't gotten a chance to play Pocket Dungeon yet, but I have gotten a chance to play Shovel Knight Dig, and I wanted to talk about it because I am extremely addicted to it right now. So, Shovel Knight Dig is a roguelike that is a Shovel Knight game, obviously, just like Pocket Dungeon. But this one kind of more closely resembles the gameplay of the campaigns that was released, and that's pretty neat. I kind of picked it up and I started playing it, and I initially beat it when it first released, but then like a week or so, because it was pretty fun, but because I was good at Shovel Knight, it didn't really take too long to do, especially since it wasn't necessarily that hard. So how does this game play? So this game controls pretty well. It plays very similarly to original Shovel Knight, as well as the following campaigns that came from it. And that's something that the other roguelike that they released didn't do. And I haven't tried the other roguelike yet, but we'll get there when we get there. This game involves a lot of digging. No surprise, that's why it's called Shovel Knight Dig. So let's first of all cover the context. So this game's context, or the story, is that Shovel Knight is sleeping by a fire, as he mostly does at the end of every level in his campaign. And while he's sleeping there, some guy decides to completely kick his ass and steal his gold and all of his stuff and go down into the hole. Which, sucks. So Shovel Knight goes after him. Very, very simple story. This game is structured like a roguelike. And the way that it works is that you have to get down to the end of routes or levels, which are a series of level geometries that are swapped around to give you different parts of a level, different rooms. They're very randomly generated, but the segments are something you can memorize and sort of master, which is something that you'll need to do, especially on the higher difficulties. Now, while going down these routes, you could come across different side rooms which have either money, an enemy ambush, or even a store that can give you some very useful items, or healing, or extra abilities if you're lucky. You use money that you find while digging along the well to find it. And the stuff you get from these people can make or break a run, let me tell you that. You can either get really good combat abilities for your shovel from the skeleton dude, you could get extra health from the mole that gives you stuff to heal, or you could get extra perks that change some other aspects of gameplay from Chester, or even a sub-weapon in this game, once again called relics. I have not actually unlocked all the relics at the time of making this video because unlocking the relics are a little bit hard, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, inside of the well, there are 3 gears per level, as the game calls it, and these gears, if you have all 3 by the end of them, will actually give you the choice in between a healing item or a random perk that you can get. This is a free way of getting it, and it's generally recommended that you try to get all of the gears by the time you get down to the bottom of any specific level. But one big problem I have is that I'll miss a gear and then I'll try to figure out a really stupid way to get back up there and try and get it, but then I'll get hurt or lose or run because I'm too stubborn to just cut my losses and move on. It's kind of funny. I've already told you in several videos, I have never claimed to be a talented gamer before. A lot of the routes are filled to the brim with different enemies. A lot of them are familiar ones from Treasure Trove, but you got some original ones as well. Another thing I want to talk about is the theming behind all these areas. The themings are generally pretty strong, and outside of the fire and water area, they're pretty original and unique theming. For example, you have the mushroom mines, which is the area you will always start in. And then you have either the waterworks, or also called as the secret fountain, or the metalworks. These are two areas that you'll either go to, either you get to choose which one you go to, or you will be forced down one because the other one will not spawn. These areas are either one or the other. After that, you come across either this hive area that's themed around bugs, or you go to the magic wastes. I really like both of these areas because they have strong original theming, and it's not something you always see in a game. And then after that, you come to Drill Knight's castle, Drill Knight being the guy that stole all of Shovel Knight's stuff and dug down this well. Along the way, as you play the game, you actually unlock the Armor Smith, and the Armor Smith is actually very important in this game because the armors that you can unlock for this game add different modifiers onto how you play at its very base. For example, you have the regular one, which is the beginner's plate, as I'm going to call it, which is take less damage, but you take less damage, but at the same time you get to keep an accessory after death, but you also get less money, which is annoying. And then you have other ones that are more interesting, like the bracers one. I don't really know how to call it, but the way it works is that when you get hit for the first time in a level, you lose half of your max health, and you lose your extra damage bonus. So the game basically encourages you to go through an entire level without taking damage. This one also has the kind of hidden ability where you take a free hit when your health gets halved. That's something that's actually very useful if you are aware of that, and something that can be used to create synergies with other items, such as the item that gives you more extra health if you consume more health when you already are at full, or even the Berserker's Bauble, which doubles your strength when you are at low health. Then you have things like this one that makes you dig very fast and allows you to do the insta shield from Sonic. I don't want to make that joke, but that's legitimately what it is. Look, it's just the insta shield. It's very, very fun, very useful. But also has a bit of a curve to learning it. It absolutely destroys bosses, like, it eviscerates them at a level I was absolutely shocked of. My problem is that I just die when I try to do a bunch of complicated things when I don't need to. And then last one I'll cover as an example is you also have the Scavenger's Plate, which I think is one of my more recent discoveries in how good it is, because it just ups the item rates of things, and that's extremely broken, because you'll get more money, you'll get more health, and yeah, you start at half health, which means that you're like 4 hits from dying in normal mode, but your luck is so absurdly high, you'll quite easily just better health by the time that you're like out of the first level. Like, it's quite good. If you're going to go with any of these, I would recommend using the Scavenger's Mail, just because I think that one's just the best one, and once you get around starting with lower health, I think that you'll do fine. But let's go ahead to talk about the other aspects of the game. So obviously each area has its own randomized gimmick that you can come across. The mine has you either come across these floating mushroom spores that can shrink you, or giant drills that are shot at you and destroy things, or this toxic room where you just lose a lot of your health, but enemies also drop a lot of healing items, so it's kind of a rush to keep your health up as you slowly die. Whereas the water area has, first of all, most prominent gimmick is that everything is wet, and therefore you can get electrocuted, which is very annoying, by either the frog enemies or the jellyfish enemies, which I don't really like this gimmick. It's hard, but it also is a little bit hard to keep track of. You'll probably want a electric resisting item for this area, which thankfully there's a pretty good chance that you'll get ahead of time. The Metalworks has the gimmick of fire. There's a lot of fire everywhere, and fire is dangerous because if you're holding any items like that are wooden, they will break the second that they touch fire, and that just kind of sucks the suck. But it also has gimmicks like lava, and it also has this gimmick sometimes of a lava room where the lava slowly drains, and so you have to slowly make your way down. It's not as hard as it looks, in my opinion, just because the bug area has a very interesting mini-boss or boss of an area at the cost of not having a drill. It's like this big queen bee looking thing, and you can kill it or you can just avoid it the entire time. I prefer to kill it whenever I get this route just because killing it gives you a ton of extra money and I think sometimes a item, but it's also a very rare thing that doesn't always happen. And the magic one has the most fun gimmick in my opinion. You can get this gimmick where you can just infinitely use any relic that you have, and that's just a really fun gimmick, and I wish more areas had gimmicks like this. Though, before we talk about bosses, I want to talk about this really stupid gimmick in Drill Knight's castle. Like, can we just talk about the fact that these crossbows are annoying as hell? It feels like you can't avoid them, and I don't really know how to. The reason why I lose a lot of runs where I have low health in this area is because I just have to end up tanking the crossbow shots, because I just do not know how to avoid them. But maybe that's just a skill issue. Who knows? The bosses in this game aren't the worst, but I do have problems with only like a few of them. Oddly enough, the first boss and the last boss are ones I struggle with the least. Like, I don't have a problem dealing with this mushroom person, and I don't have a problem dealing with Drill Knight because I've kind of memorized his pattern by now. It's not too hard to memorize. But all the other bosses that you can fight, I kind of have a hard time with. And I think I know why. It's because while the bosses have a set-in-stone attack pattern and attacks they can use, the rooms themselves for a lot of these bosses are random. And for the first and last boss, the rooms don't really matter much. There's not a whole lot that can really happen that makes the boss harder in those cases. But every other boss can get substantially more difficult from the terrain not favoring you. Especially in the case of Mole Knight and Tinker Knight, if you get a bad room formation with either of them, you're just not going to have a good time, because if you get a bad ship structure or a thing that favors Mole Knight, or a thing with Mole Knights that doesn't allow you to avoid one of the more annoying attacks easier, then it's very easy for you to just tank a lot of hits and then just immediately fail, and that's always frustrating. And I don't really know a whole ton about the later bosses like the Bug Knight or the Mage Place Knight, because I don't really get there as much, and when I do, I usually have the means to cheese them, so maybe that's just a me problem. It just kind of weird how the final boss just doesn't feel like it's that difficult in comparison to the 4 middle bosses that you can come across. In a true ending run, which is where you get to the bottom of the well and fulfill a bunch of really, really, really oddly specific things, which I'll scroll down the screen right now, you actually get to go into the Tower of Fate and fight the Enchantress, which gives you the true ending of this game. It sets up this game as a prequel to the original Shovel Knight that comes even before the flashback in Spectre of Torment, which I always found a little bit interesting. Though I do find it kind of funny that in a Shovel Knight project, the Enchantress is always the final boss. In a funny way. So, I didn't really have a hard time getting to this part once I kind of got good enough at the game, so that's it. End of video, right? There's nothing really to cover besides that, right? Well, that's where this video would have ended if I made this game before the game's extra update that they added, because they added a lot of new things in one of the updates for the game. They added a whole extra side quest of stuff that makes the game harder. It's like extra challenges in Inscription. And these are all absolutely demonic in terms of their actual difficulty. I struggle with a lot of these because a lot of them are just very hard to deal with. They're called the Nightmare modes, and the way it works is that you beat one, and then another challenge is added on top of it, and it gets progressively more and more hard to play through. And that's it. I could complain about how a lot of these, like taking away your access to healing, or making enemies deal more damage, or have enemies take more damage, is just adding more fluff onto the game and just making it arbitrarily more difficult without introducing anything new. But at the same time, it's oddly satisfying to struggle for a long period of time and then finally be able to just relax and feel proud once you finally got a run that gets you to the very end of the game. It's a very, very good feeling, and it's a feeling that I wouldn't have experienced if they didn't add this update in. Now, I only wanted to briefly mention this. I'll go more into detail with the Nightmare mode if I ever beat it. I'll make a second video covering it and my strategies with it, because I think that would be generally fun. But I just wanted to bring it up at the end of this video just because I thought that would be pretty fun. Anyways, thank you for listening to this kind of out of nowhere, really messy video about Shovel Knight. I don't know what I'll make a video on, but God knows I'll know about it the same day that I record it, because that's how I do things now. This is Snake Solid, and you all have a fabulous night. Go play Shovel Knight, you goobers.